je vous remercie beaucoup vos paroles, parce que ce sont des paroles très sages, en disant ça de la collaboration des experts internationaux et des experts nationaux. C'est très important. Et justement, je vais revenir vers vos mots avec un personnage que vous connaissez très bien ici en Tunisie, Yugurta. Donc, je prends un morceau de la guerre de Yugurta, de Saloust, que j'avais lu il y a très longtemps, même en catalan, imaginez-vous, mais que je crois que c'est très pertinent pour cet objectif de cet atelier. Donc, dans la guerre de Yugurta, on dit « C'est à tort que le genre humain se plaint de sa nature et déplore qu'impuissante et de courte durée. Son existence soit régie plus par le hasard que par la mérité. À bien y réfléchir, au contraire, on ne saurait trouver rien de plus grand et de plus excellent. Et l'on constate que c'est davantage l'activité qui manque à la nature humaine que la force ou le temps. Et pourquoi j'ai dit ça? Parce que ce n'est pas l'hasard qui va faire que la Tunisie progresse. Ce n'est pas l'hasard, ce n'est pas sorcier, ça. C'est les connaissances. Et c'est les gens experts du nord de la Méditerranée, du sud de la Méditerranée, la collaboration. C'est la chose qu'on a essayé sur le VRS, et par exemple, ça on a essayé, c'est la transférence de connaissances, et que tout le monde puisse lutter pour un objectif commun, que c'est l'objectif de la lutte contre la pollution. C'est ça le but. Donc, Jugurtha disait ça de hasard, c'est la force humaine. Je crois qu'aujourd'hui, c'est la possibilité de faire cette force humaine. Donc, on va faire un rapport de l'histoire et à la fin, je suis sûr qu'avec ces connaissances, on va parvenir au but que nous avons l'agence, le ministère, le gouvernement, MedWaves, le VRS. Donc maintenant, on commence. Je vous remercie beaucoup de votre présence. On va attendre Madame Cambian ici, on va lui donner sa parole. Et maintenant, c'est le tour de Keyono. Keyono, comme vous voyez sur l'agenda, c'est la responsable du VRS sur des activités, elle travaille sur ça. Elle va nous présenter qu'est-ce que ce sont ces polluants persistants organiques, qu'est-ce qu'on fait. C'est une introduction pour après aller dans toute la discussion plus en profondeur. Donc, Keyono, c'est à votre tour. Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Keyono, j'habite à Genève, donc je parle français, mais ça pas good enough to make a presentation. So I will be speaking in English. Hope this will also go through to your understanding on persistent organic pollutants. Will my presentation be here? Okay, let me try. Voila. So how many of you know what are persistent organic pollutants? The definition? Yes. Expert. So definition of persistent organic pollutants. Very important elements are listed here. They're all persistent by name. What it means is that it stays in the environment. It doesn't break down for many years. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't break down at all. There are also transformation products that are equally toxic sometimes, or there are also related compounds that are equally concerning. So persistence, and then bioaccumulation, it means it will be higher concentration over time inside your body. In the old pops, most of them were accumulating in your fatty tissue because they were hydrophobic. They're not dissolving in water, but staying in oil phase. But newer pops are more hydrophilic. They dissolve in water, and they don't necessarily accumulate only in fatty tissue, but also other parts of body. For example, PFAS. They are one of the hydrophilic pops. So it's not just only fatty tissue, but other part of the body could bioaccumulate. Adverse effects, we don't call it toxicity because definition of toxicity change different from country to country. Some countries think endocrine disruption is not toxic in some countries, but there are adverse effects. So endocrine disruption is one of the adverse effects considered. Carcinogenicity, immunotoxicity. There are several of adverse effects, not only on human health, but also ecosystems. And then the last one, potential for long-range environmental transport. This is very tricky. It means that the chemical can be found in long distance, far from the source, far from where you have used. Like in old pops, for example, pesticides, they traveled through a phenomena called grasshopper effect. So with the chemical goes up in the sky, falls as a rain, and then it goes up again and then falls down with the rain. And this one was this movement of water cycle tends to go towards the polar region, from south to north, or from middle, from equator to south. It was moving from towards the polar regions. And that is why some of the nasty pesticides listed as the initial 12 POPs were found in the Arctic region. By detection, by monitoring of these chemicals, they found toxic chemicals in the Arctic region or Antarctic region, and they found it very important to address these chemicals at the global level, because you can't manage them if the countries that are using those chemicals take action. So that is why the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants was agreed upon by parties. We have 186 parties to the convention. That includes very important provisions. For example, number one, to stop the source, right? Intentional releases. Prohibit use and production, export, and import of these chemicals. Yeah, first, to cut the tap. The export and import is allowed only for the purpose of environmentally sound waste management. That means that if you don't have a capacity to manage PCB, for example, polychlorobiphenyls, then you can export it to countries like Germany or France. You know, they have facility to destroy these chemicals. And this is allowed. But if you do that, you need to follow the protocol under the Basel Convention on Waste. So I work for BRS, it's Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention. There's another waste convention that governs the waste part. Then there's a specific exemption in Article 4. So some of the chemicals you have to continue using, like DDT for malaria control, or PFAS for firefighting foam. You know, when you don't have alternatives ready, countries want to continue. Still, you have to phase out, but there's a time-limited specific exemption and also acceptable purpose with no time limitation. Like, so DDT for malaria control is listed as acceptable purpose. So that's a very important function of Article 4. We have Article 5. It's about unintentional releases. So like dioxins, furans. You don't produce these chemicals for use. They are released unintentionally when you burn materials that contain chlorine at a temperature that is not high enough. So it's an incomplete combustion that will release toxic chemicals. So dioxins and furans are one example. There's also pentachlorobenzene, hexachlorobenzene. Some are listed in Annex C. And they have promotion for BAT and BEP, best available technique, and best environment practice. And finally, very important provision is in Article 6 about waste management. So the chemical itself, the pesticide itself that's banned are okay, they are waste. But not just only that, but also products and articles containing POPs, like carpets that has very toxic flame retardants. They need to be managed as POPs waste. And there is a whole range of technical guidelines under the Basel Convention. So as you can see, Basel and Stockholm Convention, we have very strong linkage. And in order to evaluate whether the Stockholm Convention was effective, we have Article 16 on effectiveness evaluation. And how do you evaluate whether something was good or bad or doing fine? Or you need numbers, no? You need indicators. You need to measure, compare day 1, day 100, 10 years, 20 years. So there are several indicators, but one of the most important indicators that the Stockholm Convention has is the monitoring data. And this is measured through global monitoring plan. And through this GMP, global monitoring plan, we have background data that was collected 20 years ago for initial 12 POPs. Now we measure them. Most of them are going down, reduced, thanks to the prohibition of use and production and so on. And to implement this, we have a committee and expert groups established, like effectiveness evaluation committee, and then regional organization groups and global coordination group, as you can imagine. The initial GMP, the first set, it's every 6 years. The first phase was from 2004 to 2011. And then 2011 to 2017, 2017 to 2023. So the previous COP, not that this COP just happened, but the previous COP, we have the third GMP report. However, there are several challenges with GMP. First challenge, as you can easily imagine, is the laboratory capacity in the countries. Not every country can measure that they don't have GCMS, LCMS, measure the data, even from sampling technique. I'm organic chemist by training. So if you send me, I can assist you. But I cannot go to 150, developing countries and, help. And even one person cannot do it because you need to have a laboratory, you need to have supply, you need to maintain the lab. And then more challenging is that at every COP, they're adding new chemicals. So that just 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, our 2025 COP added another 3 chemicals: chlorpyrifos, medium chain chlorinated paraffins, and long chain PFCAs. So we have organic chemist experts over there knows how challenging to measure MCCPs in the environment. Who can measure them? Do you know how many MCCPs there are? There are like thousands of congeners there. And we already have short chain chlorinated paraffins. Okay, so what are we now measuring? Chlorinated paraffins of which congener, C13 to C14, with this chlorination level at or above 45% chlorine level. Like, how do you measure these very complicated newly listed chemicals? Is a challenge. And then another challenge is that what are they telling you when you measure them? When you measure these chemicals at the background level, most likely it's below detection limit because you don't have good capacity to also measure. The detection limit is high if your technique level is not high enough. So, almost zero, whatever, is it's very difficult for policymakers to use that kind of data. The third challenge is I mentioned about that the initial 12 chemicals, many pesticides, traveled towards Arctic. Now, when they measure the levels in Arctic region, some of the pesticides are increasing. Not necessarily because of the Stockholm Convention non-effectiveness, but scientists are estimating that it's from climate change. because of climate change, the ice melts and some of the chemicals that are trapped in the ice are released. So it's increasing. And then is it telling you about the effectiveness of the Stockholm Convention? Not necessarily. So after 20 years, in my view, it is getting very difficult to maintain GMP because of the complexity in chemicals, and also the limitation in measuring just only background data, telling you that it's mostly declining, but with the climate change, it's increasing. While you're not measuring actual data like exposure data, hotspot monitoring, or chemicals in products, which is more difficult to measure, these are not included in the current thinking of GMP. So yeah, and here I have a list of 31 POPs that are measured during this period, and the core media for GMP is air, human tissues like blood and milk, which is very, very important information, by the way, because that really tells you how much we have been exposed. And the data from human tissue is showing really that the levels are decreasing, at least for initially listed chemicals. And then those PFAS that are hydrophilic, not found more in water phase, we have additional core media, water. So GMP reports are available on the website, and you can also access the raw data from GMP Data Warehouse. You can see the link here. Maybe you can Google and you will find it. UNEP Chemicals branch, which is also located in the same building in Geneva, also developed, and they are supporting, by the way, the implementation of POPs monitoring, and they have dashboard. So it's a bit long URL, but you can access and you can see it more visually by mapping. And here are several of air monitoring stations that are contributed to GMP3. So it's difficult, because this is global report, it's difficult for just one country to do something and then provide that information for coherency and comparability of data. So it's important to have regional cooperation. And you can see that some Latin America has a lot of stations, North America as well. So GAPS network are covering that area. European continent is also full of stations, but you can see the gaps in the African continent. Here, including in Tunisia, you have maybe one dot, but not much in the middle. Same for Central Asian region, Arabic region. So we call it GMP, but with a bit of gaps. And as I have mentioned earlier, so initial POPs, like what are they? HCH, so hexachlorocyclohexane, like alpha, beta, and gamma, which is linden, are listed under the Stockholm Convention. They are decreasing. You can also see PCB and PCN. The graph is a bit not necessarily always clear, but in general, it is showing decreasing trend. That is a good news. Also in the mother milk sample, you can see over years from 2000 compared to 2016 to 2019 survey, the WHO's dioxin PCB TEQ is quite getting in a decreasing trend. Yeah, it's a very good news. So for these initial chemicals and looking at the mother survey is a good information for government to be confident about the Stockholm Convention. But on the other hand, look at this data from PFAS. We don't know what this is telling because it's all over the place. It looks like it's going up and then down, but okay, what about that 2018? That's really have a gap. There are several reasons possible to explain why this is so scattered. Maybe the data is not accurate enough, very limited stations, but also maybe consistent input to the environment, that it is indeed sometimes it increases. So yeah, the PFAS in the environment data is challenging, and sometimes it's very sensitive as well. People get scared of drinking water or so. So we would need to even think more about how to continue PFAS monitoring. Here you can see the PFOS and PFOA ratio, try to analyze what these are telling us. This is a data from the Asia Pacific region. And then finally, the GMP also includes long-range environmental transport data. So from the air sampling data, they have colored where these POPs are found more. And you can see in the northern hemisphere, the more north area, the higher the concentration, possibly explaining the long-range environmental transport, the grasshopper effect, and so on. But also maybe naturally human activities are concentrated on the northern hemisphere. So I have like a few boring slides to summarize the GMP and GMP timelines. But what is very important is that currently we are at the fourth cycle, the 6-year cycle. So we're doing the same, like background data. But I am thinking, and I'm talking to experts, that this is not enough and this is not sustainable. We need to look at more of the exposure data, more from the chemicals in products and articles, maybe try to find where the hotspots are, how the waste, the stockpiles are found, so that policymakers can take action based on the monitoring data. We should continue with the good news of trying to show that the concentration levels are decreasing. But that is not all what the current status of POPs, especially for emerging chemicals, like the ones that were listed under the convention at the last meeting. And another one very complicated, UV328. We just had that listing of UV328 amended to add another exemption for aircraft. That means that the use of this chemical will continue, and including for spare parts like 2044. It's a very, very long time. And so, yeah, it's maybe, we should start considering how best the GMP data can help making policy. And within these 6 years, before the next cycle starts, we should have a bit better idea of implementing the paradigm shift of GMP. So we have the list of regional groups that are helping GMP projects, and MedProgramme is one of them that is contributing to this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kay. Com nous som en retard, Kay a oublié une partie très importante, que c'est la vidéo. Donc maintenant, on va passer une vidéo qui va synthétiser tout ce que Kay vient de dire. S'il vous plaît, vous pouvez la mettre.
We need to talk. It's about the intimate relationships you are in. What I mean is, do you realize the encounters you are having with chemicals that last forever? The air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and the products we use, these are all ways we are in relationship with persistent organic pollutants. POPs, or persistent organic pollutants, are not only a threat when we first encounter them, They continue to live on in nature even after they are disposed, bioaccumulating, casting a long-term and wide-range threat for human health and the environment. There is a way to reduce and eliminate the threat of body burden. It starts by making visible the invisible. Pollution by hazardous chemicals and waste cross borders and boundaries. This is not a problem that can be solved by one country alone. It is a global problem requiring global cooperation for global solutions. The BRS conventions are legally binding agreements, which means that parties are required to take measures to protect human health and the environment from persistent organic pollutants. The BRS conventions bring us together so we can actually have international cooperation, promote the exchange of scientific information, and support countries in implementing measures to prevent and reduce harmful exposures, ultimately contributing to the reduction and elimination of body burden. The work of the conventions is successful because of each of us. As individuals, we can advocate for stronger national policies by raising awareness in our communities. As governments, we can integrate chemicals and waste management into national development plans and enforce the existing regulations. As businesses, we can adopt sustainable production practices, invest in non-toxic alternatives, and do what it takes to make our supply chains transparent. As civil society organizations, we can help monitor what is happening, support the engagement of our communities, and bring forward our science-based recommendations. This is how we make visible the invisible.
Donc, merci beaucoup, Keyono, pour cette présentation que vous avez menée, parce que c'était très intéressant, réellement.